Hello, this week we are looking at lesson 7 from the book by Hill and Others, and that starts on page 55. So the lesson is called Filling Out What Is Said. Filling Out What Is Said. Let's read together the story on page 55 called News from Home. Look at and discuss the questions that follow. So I'll read the story now. News from Home. That day, Peter got a phone call from his wife telling him their son, who had just recovered from a serious bout of malaria, had a temperature again and had been taken back to the hospital in the middle of the night. He and John prayed for the situation before going to bed, but all night long Peter tossed and turned. When they woke up in the morning, he said to John, "I didn't sleep at all. What if my son's fever is worse? How will we pay for medicine? We don't have any money." John answered, "It's difficult to be away from home when troubles come. Let's continue to pray for healing. God is our rock, especially at times like this." Now let's look at the group discussion questions. The first one, what do you think Peter's wife meant when she said their son had a temperature again? Doesn't everyone have a temperature all the time? Number 2, when Peter's wife said they took their son to the hospital in the middle of the night, do you think she meant 12 a.m. exactly? Could she have taken him at 1 a.m.? How do you understand middle of the night? Pause the video and discuss this. Okay, number 3. What do you think Peter meant when he said, "I didn't sleep at all"? Do you think he didn't sleep even for a minute during the night? Pause the video and discuss this. Okay, number 4. What do you think Peter meant when he said, "We don't have any money"? Do you think they had nothing at all? Discuss. And the last one, number 5. What did John mean when he said, "God is our rock"? Pause the video and discuss this. Okay, so those are some interesting questions, an interesting story, and an interesting illustration of how we fill out what is said. That Hill helps us understand that there's more to what is said. Hill uses the illustration of a signpost to describe how a speaker shows a listener which direction to go to find meaning. Your job as translators is to figure out from the original author's signposts what they mean, and then give an appropriate signpost to your target audience for them to get the same meaning. This is a difficult task because, first, speakers may mean more or less than what they say. And second, speakers may not intend what they say to be literally true. We saw this in the story and questions following the story, right? So Hill also writes that some words or expressions do not have much content on their own. For example, a quote big can mean completely different things if you are talking about a baby or an elephant, a big baby or a big elephant. Or sometimes it's hard to find any content from certain words or phrases. For example, John's house means very little without context. Does the house refer to one he owns, one he built, one he lives in, one he drew on a piece of paper? What does it mean when we say John's house? Sometimes words or expressions have more than one concept. This is when you have to be extra careful as a translator, when there's one or more concept, because misunderstandings can easily occur. Hill gives the example, he beats me every time we play cards. In English, we assume that the opponent wins in a game when we say he beats me. But one could also interpret this as the player gets beaten up. In English, many jokes use words and phrases that have double meanings. Idioms are also words that are used with other words to mean something else, something that should not be taken literally. Scripture uses idioms, and as translators, you have to be careful to identify idioms and work to understand the intended meaning. Translate the following statement into Swahili and Kikurewe. Be careful to use an appropriate idiom for your language for jumping off points. So the statement is, and I'll put it in the WhatsApp chat, translators need to use words and expressions that are the best jumping off points for their audiences to understand the intended meaning. Translators need to use words and expressions that are the best jumping off points for their audiences to understand the intended meaning. So you're going to have to what this jumping off points means. It's like a signpost. And then you have to give the correct signpost to your Swahili audience and your Kurewe audience. And then let me know how you translated it. And then for your assignment, do page 62, number 2, which is compare these translations of 2 Kings 19:35. What are two ways the King James could be understood? How have the NIV and the TEV removed this confusion? So they give you a translation of the verse in 3 different versions, and you can see they're pretty different. And compare the translations as directed, and send me your answers for that question. Like, how can it be understood? What are 2 ways that it can be understood? And then how did the NIV and the TEV remove this confusion of the 2 ways that the King James could be understood? All right.